My name is Will Carter. I'm 42 years old, and until last week, I was just another quiet uniform in a sea of louder ones. I've spent the last 18 years in the Army, not on the front lines, not in the press releases. I was in logistics, boxes, maps, numbers, making sure people got what they needed when they needed it without asking how it got there. Most people didn't see me unless something went wrong. And when it didn't, they assumed someone more important had made it happen. My father served in Vietnam. My older brother went to West Point and now runs a unit with his name stitched on every door. I didn't follow them because I thought I had something to prove. I followed because the Carter men serve, and I believed, foolishly maybe, that serving well was enough. My desk was in the back corner of a concrete building that never saw sunlight. I was the one who stayed late to fix mistakes others didn't know they made. I wrote reports that got someone else promoted. I ran drills that someone else took credit for. I knew it, and I let it happen, because I told myself it wasn't about recognition, it was about duty. But that morning last Friday, I walked into my office for the last time with a cardboard box in my arms. Inside was a framed photo of my dad in uniform, a pen my daughter gave me when I first made lieutenant, and a binder with something much more important than it looked. The kind of thing that could change the course of someone else's story, or ruin it. People looked at me funny. Nobody had heard I was leaving. That was intentional. I didn't want handshakes or forced speeches. I didn't want anyone asking me why, because I wasn't ready to tell them, not yet. I sat at my desk, looked at the spot where my nameplate used to be. Then I took a deep breath, stood up, and carried the box back out through the same hallway I'd walked 1,000 times. Except this time, I wasn't coming back. And this time, someone else was going to remember my name. Colonel Robert Hale wasn't the shouting type. He didn't raise his voice to tear someone down. He did it with smiles, with sarcasm that cut sharper than any order barked across a field. That's what made him dangerous. That's what made him effective. And for a long time, that's what made me invisible. He called me logistics boy in front of the entire division once. Just tossed it out during a debrief like it was a harmless joke. I had just finished coordinating the rerouting of 200 tons of equipment across 3 states in under 48 hours. No delays, no casualties, no thanks. Just a smirk from Hale and a punchline that stuck. Sometimes he went with Spreadsheet Soldier, said I probably got lost if there wasn't a color-coded chart telling me what to do. The room would laugh. Not because it was funny, but because when someone with 4 stars on his lapel laughs, everyone else thinks they should too. He didn't hate me. That's the part people misunderstand. He dismissed me, as if I was too dull to threaten him, too small to matter. In a way, that was worse. You can fight hate. You can't fight being unseen. And yet, when his name was printed in bold on the cover of the most praised logistics overhaul the Army had seen in 10 years, I didn't say a word. That overhaul was my work, my blueprint, my simulation runs, my sleepless nights, and his promotion. I watched him get pinned in a ceremony I wasn't invited to. I stood at my desk while the room down the hall cheered. I told myself it didn't matter, that my job was to serve, not to shine. That recognition was for those who needed it. That loyalty was measured in silence. But something shifted after that. Not anger exactly, not even bitterness, just a stillness. A pause between breaths, like the moment before a storm begins. I started listening differently, watching differently, storing things I would have thrown away before. He thought I wasn't paying attention. He thought the quiet guy in the back was harmless. But harmless men don't stay quiet forever. Especially not when the one thing they cared about, honor, gets stepped on by someone who thinks stripes make you untouchable. I didn't plan revenge. That's not what this was. I planned correction. I planned clarity. Because someday, someone was going to ask who really built that system. And when they did, I wanted the answer to be undeniable. Operation Phantom started as a problem nobody wanted to touch. Supplies were arriving late. Convoys were overlapping. Fuel was wasted moving equipment that should have been staged days earlier. Every fix created another bottleneck somewhere else, and leadership kept calling it the cost of doing business. I saw it differently. To me, it was a math problem pretending to be a logistics failure. If you tracked movement patterns instead of unit requests, if you staged based on probability instead of rank, you could cut waste without cutting readiness. So I started building a model in the evenings, long after everyone else went home. Operation Phantom wasn't flashy. It didn't promise miracles. It reorganized supply routes based on real demand, not who shouted loudest in planning meetings. It reduced redundant transport, shortened resupply windows, and cut operational costs by more than half in simulation alone. When we tested it during a limited exercise, the results were even better. Equipment arrived faster. Units stopped stockpiling out of fear. Commanders trusted the pipeline instead of hoarding resources. For the first time in years, the system worked the way it was supposed to. I submitted the plan through proper channels. Detailed breakdowns, risk assessments, contingency layers, everything documented, time-stamped, and reviewed. It landed on Colonel Hale's desk because that was the structure. I didn't think twice about it. 2 weeks later, I was scrolling through an internal briefing summary while eating lunch at my desk. Operation Phantom had been approved for wider implementation. I felt proud. That pride lasted about 10 seconds. The report header listed the project lead as Colonel Robert Hale. Under contributors, there were names I recognized. Mine wasn't one of them. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. Formatting error. Oversight. Something that would be corrected quietly. Then I opened the full report. Every diagram was mine. Every efficiency metric came from my simulations. Even the phrasing felt familiar because it was familiar. It was my work, lifted whole, cleaned up, and relabeled. I remember staring at the screen longer than I should have. Not angry, not shocked, just still. Like my body needed time to accept what my eyes were seeing. I scrolled down slowly, hoping my name would appear somewhere. Footnotes, appendices, anything. It never did. Later that week, Hale briefed senior leadership using my slides. I stood in the back of the room and watched him explain my logic with confidence. He talked about strategic foresight, about innovation, about leadership. No one questioned him. Why would they? When the applause came, I didn't clap. I didn't leave either. I just stood there and listened to men praise a vision that had cost me months of my life, handed to someone who had never asked how it worked. That was the moment something cracked. Not loudly, quietly. A realization settled in that loyalty without protection is just permission to be used. I had believed the system rewarded integrity. What it really rewarded was proximity to power. I didn't confront Hale. I didn't report it. Not yet. I went back to my office, closed the door, and pulled up my original files. The raw models, the early drafts, the version histories. I looked at the timestamps and felt something close to relief. Because, for the first time, I understood the game I was in. And once you see the rules clearly, you stop playing fair by accident. After that day, I started saving everything. Every email, every draft, every meeting invite that mentioned Operation Phantom. I downloaded the raw files and backed them up twice. I printed the version histories, circled timestamps, noted who accessed what and when. Not because I planned to file a complaint, because I knew I'd need proof when the time came. I didn't talk about it. Not to my team. Not to my commanding officer. I just got quieter, more observant. I stopped offering ideas in meetings. I stopped volunteering for extra shifts. Hale thought I was sulking. Maybe he even liked the silence. That was fine by me. I reached out to an old friend who worked down at the Pentagon in a civilian analyst role. We used to serve together back in Kansas. I didn't give details, just asked him what it takes to get a logistics plan elevated to congressional oversight. He paused, then asked if someone had taken something from me. I told him I wasn't sure yet, but I would be. He offered to connect me with a legal rep. I thanked him and said I wasn't interested in lawsuits. I wasn't trying to fight in court. I was aiming for something else. I didn't want a judge's ruling. I wanted the whole table flipped. I said it out loud once. Just once. Sitting across from him at a diner outside base housing, I looked him in the eye and told him the truth. I don't need to sue. I need to flip the damn table. He didn't laugh. He just nodded and passed me a napkin with a name on it. From that point on, I planned in layers. I stored everything off-site, labeled by date, context, and source. If you opened the folder, it looked like an archive. If you read it start to finish, it told a different story. The kind of story that unravels a career, the kind that leaves no room for denial. No one suspected a thing. That was the benefit of being seen as harmless. While they called me logistics boy, I was quietly building a file that could take down a man 3 ranks above me, not with revenge. With truth, delivered at the right moment, in the right room, to the right people. And when that moment came, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. I just need to open the box. I placed the envelope right in the center of his desk. No fanfare, no speech. Just a plain white letter with my name signed neatly at the bottom. Colonel Robert Hale looked up from his screen with the smug half-smile he wore like a rank of its own. He didn't even open it. He leaned back in his chair, hands folded like a man watching a coin toss he'd already fixed. Said I wouldn't last a month out there. Said the private sector would chew up a logistics guy like me and spit me back out looking for scraps. I didn't argue. I just listened. Quietly. The way I always had. But this time, there was no trace of agreement in my silence. No submission. Just space. Space for his words to hang useless in the air and fade like smoke. He told me I was walking away from the only thing I was ever good at. That men like me didn't belong in the spotlight. That I was born to serve under better minds. I think he believed that, truly, which made it all the easier to walk away. I picked up the box I'd set on the floor beside me. Same one I'd carried in the day I started here. Now filled with pieces of the years I gave away. Photo of my father. My daughter's pen. The binder, still closed. Still unread by him. He looked at it, then at me, and asked what I thought I was going to do with my little collection of files. I met his eyes and let the quiet stretch between us. Then I said the one thing I knew would sit with him longer than anything else I could have shouted. I told him not all files are for reference. Some are for evidence. His smile faltered just a breath. Enough for me to see the flicker. The recognition. He didn't know what I meant. Not exactly. But he knew I did. And that was enough. I turned without another word and walked out. One step at a time. Steady, deliberate. Because sometimes the loudest sound in a room is the door that closes behind you. 2 weeks after I walked out, I got a call from someone I never expected to hear from again. A retired general I'd worked with years ago on a training logistics pilot. Back then, I'd sent him a proposal that shaved 2 weeks off his mobilization schedule. I never heard if he used it. Turns out, he remembered. He told me there was a project spinning up at the Pentagon. Something with AI systems for predictive resupply, unit-level demand modeling, and logistics under battlefield disruption. They needed someone who understood ground-level logistics, but also knew how to speak the language of data. He said my name came up more than once. So I went. No fanfare, no formal uniform, just a visitor badge and the binder I hadn't opened since the day I left. The first thing they asked for wasn't a resume. It was insight. They wanted my thinking, not my title. That alone told me I was in the right room. For the first time in years, I spoke freely. I mapped the blind spots in their data model, pointed out where their assumptions would collapse in live environments. They listened. Actually listened. And then they handed me clearance credentials and called me Special Advisor to Strategic Systems Integration. I worked from a small office with real light and a quiet hum. I didn't have a rank. But for once, I had weight. Decisions that used to be made without me now landed on my desk first. Emails came addressed directly to me. Proposals bore my name and no one else's. And every time someone asked how I'd learned to spot failure before it started, I just said the same thing. Years of watching people who never thought I was watching them. Years of being silent in rooms where others were too loud to notice the cracks forming beneath their own plans. 3 months in, I got a formal invitation to the Joint Defense Logistics Symposium. It's the kind of event that used to happen behind doors I was never invited to. This time, I wasn't just invited, I was the keynote. The topic was modern logistics resilience. But I knew what it really was. It was my moment. My return to a room that once clapped for someone who stole what I built. And now they were going to hear it from me. Unfiltered. Direct. I saw the attendee list 2 days before the event. Colonel Robert Hale, still in uniform, still high-ranking, still attending. I didn't flinch, didn't get angry. I just closed the file and smiled. Because this time, I wasn't walking into that room hoping to be seen. I was walking in because they needed what only I could give. It's strange how life works. Sometimes you disappear just long enough for people to start asking where you went. And when you come back, you're not asking for your place anymore. You're offering it on your terms. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. Not just of reputation, but of something quieter. Something deeper. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, the right things find their way back to the people who built them. The ballroom was packed. Rows of uniforms, suits, and lanyards stretched from wall to wall. The lights were sharp, the air still. I stepped onto the stage with my notes in one hand and a small black flash drive in the other. I saw him before I even reached the podium. Front row, second seat from the left. Colonel Robert Hale. Chest full of ribbons. Arms crossed. Same smug grin, like this was just another speech from a logistics nerd. I didn't blink. I opened with the basics. Presented the future of logistics, automation, and AI integration for battlefield sustainability. The kind of dry language they expect at these things. Enough acronyms and policy buzzwords to keep it official. But then I shifted. I told them about a pilot model that had transformed unit readiness 3 years ago. How it cut resource lag by 47% and cost overruns by nearly half. How it allowed commanders to make decisions in real time instead of waiting on paper trails. Then, I asked if anyone remembered Operation Phantom. People nodded. Hale didn't move. I pulled up a slide labeled Authorship Timeline. Then came another labeled File Origin Logs. The room got quieter. You could hear chairs creak. My voice didn't change. I read timestamps, file IDs, access logs, approval chains. Then I pulled up the first draft of the original framework. It had my name in the metadata, not hidden, not disputed, just there. Documented and timestamped 2 months before the official submission signed by Colonel Robert Hale. I didn't look at him yet. I kept going. Showed the internal emails. The approval request he forwarded with the body of the text unchanged. The header stripped. The source deleted. The silence in that room could crush bone. Then I finally looked up. He wasn't smiling anymore. I closed the slide deck and inserted the flash drive into the side of the podium. Told the room the full file was now submitted for review to the Department of Defense Inspector General and copied to the Office of Military Oversight. My job wasn't to accuse. It was to clarify. And what I'd clarified was that the record was wrong. Until now, the moderator tried to shift the conversation. The Secretary of Defense interrupted her, asked for a moment, then turned to Hale and asked if he had anything to say. He didn't. The Secretary announced that an internal investigation would begin immediately. That all records involving Operation Phantom would be placed under audit. You could feel the ground shift. One man's career collapsing in real time under the weight of a truth he thought no one would dare to speak. I left the stage to a standing ovation. Not loud, not theatrical, just real. Respect given not for performance, but for precision. For finally, after years of being dismissed, putting the right name on the right work, Hale never stood, never clapped. I didn't care. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it so no one else like me would ever have to eat their pride to stay in the room. So the quiet ones would know they weren't invisible. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it simply steps into the light and says, Here's what really happened. It didn't take long after the symposium. Within a week, Robert Hale was placed on administrative leave pending a formal investigation. A month later, he was quietly removed from command. No press release, no ceremony. Just a name taken off the door and a silence that said more than any speech could. They didn't strip his rank, not yet. But the damage was done. The trust was gone. His name no longer opened doors the way it used to. Men like him, they survive on perception. Once that's gone, the rest falls fast. His emails stopped going out. His calendar cleared. His voice vanished from the places where it used to echo loudest. I never saw him again after that day. No messages, no attempt at an explanation. That was fine by me. Some truths don't need confrontation. They just need daylight. What surprised me more were the messages that came to me. Quiet emails from junior officers I'd never met. One said he'd watched how I worked in silence and learned what strength actually looked like. Another said he'd nearly left the army until he saw someone finally hold power accountable. A third just wrote, "Thank you." No signature, no title, just that. I didn't respond to any of them. I saved each one. Labeled by date, stored in a folder I never shared, not for ego, not for proof, just for the nights when I needed to remember why it all mattered. There was no victory party, no promotion, no medal. And honestly, I didn't want one. What I wanted was peace, and I had that now. The storm had passed, and I was still standing, not because I shouted louder, but because I never stopped telling the truth, even when no one listened. Justice, when it's real, doesn't need an audience. It just needs to land. And this time, it did. Not with a bang, but with a quiet shift in the air. The kind you only notice if you've been holding your breath for too long. Some men rise through fear, others fall through truth. And the rest of us, we just keep walking forward, knowing that sometimes silence breaks louder than noise ever could. My new office has windows. 2 of them, actually. One looks out over the Potomac. The other frames the Capitol dome just far enough away to remind me where decisions are made, and close enough to remember that people like me still shape them. It's quiet here, not in the hollow way it used to be, but in a way that feels earned. The kind of quiet that comes when you no longer need to prove anything. The kind that lets you work with your door half open, your coffee half warm, and your thoughts exactly where they should be. There's a small plaque on the desk with my name. Not engraved, just printed. Simple, clean. It means nothing and everything at once. No rank, no title chasing validation. Just Will Carter. That's enough now. Sometimes, between meetings, I catch myself staring out the window, watching the city move, the river bend, the slow flow of traffic and life. It's strange how a view can slow your heartbeat, remind you that the pace outside doesn't have to define the one inside. I think about the years in that concrete box, the dark hallways, the echo of boots and the hum of machines that never stopped long enough to let anyone breathe. Back then, I thought keeping my head down was the same as standing tall. I know better now. I don't carry bitterness with me. That weight would only slow me down. What happened shaped me, but it doesn't own me. Hale's name comes up now and then in conversations about ethics training. I don't join in. I've said all I needed to say, in the only way that mattered. These days I work because I want to, not because I have to. The job is demanding, but no longer draining. When I speak, people listen. Not because they're told to, but because they choose to. And that changes everything. There's a picture of my daughter on the shelf. She's older now, wiser than I was at her age. She once asked me why I never quit, even when it felt pointless. I told her the truth, because some things matter whether anyone sees them or not. Legacy isn't what they write about you. It's what you leave in the systems you helped build, the people you quietly lifted, the lessons that last longer than your nameplate. As the sun shifts through the glass, I let it land on my hands. Steady, open, at peace. I lean back, stretch, and let the silence settle. Then I smile. Not because I've won, not because anyone finally said I was right, but because I made it to the other side still whole, still myself, still here. And now, finally, my room has windows.